Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar, How to Eliminate the Disconnect Between Patient Expectations and Reality. On behalf of Becker's Healthcare, I'm Erica Carbajal, and thank you so much for joining us today. Before we begin, I'm going to walk through just a few quick housekeeping instructions here. So first, we will begin today's webinar with a presentation and a panel, and we will have time at the end for a question and answer session. You can go ahead and submit any questions that you have throughout the webinar by typing them into that Q&A box that you should see on your screen. Today's session is also being recorded, so it will be available after the event. And you can go ahead and use the same link that you used to log into today's webinar to access that recording once it's available. And if at any time you don't see your slides moving, or if you have trouble with the audio, just try refreshing your browser. And you can also use that same Q&A box for any technical questions that you might have. We're here to help with those. And with that, I'm pleased to welcome today's speakers. First, we have Annie Harmon, Head of Strategy and Consulting for Healthcare and Life Sciences at Reputation. And next, we have Celine Patterson, Healthcare Strategy and Consulting Manager at Reputation. Thank you both so much for being here today. And Celine, I'll now go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Erica. Happy to be here. So a little bit of background about myself. I'm responsible for supporting the healthcare vertical strategic initiatives at Reputation. So as many of us know, healthcare is changing rapidly, and consumer focus has become a priority for most organizations. In fact, a recent survey of healthcare executives by Kaufman Hall found that 81% of healthcare executives have identified improving consumer experience as a high priority for their organization. However, only 11% of those healthcare executives feel that their organization has the capabilities to deliver on a positive consumer experience. So this focus on consumer was already critical, but the pandemic accelerated this need for transformation as consumer expectations have become more focused on receiving safe and positive healthcare experiences. So before we jump right in, Annie and I were curious to know, what is the most challenging consumer trend you are facing? So you're going to see a poll on your screen. You can choose between managing online reviews and reputation, disconnect amongst various demographics, price transparency, and brand sentiment. So we'll give everybody a moment to pick their top challenge. It may be all of the above, but if you can do your best to just choose one. I see 7% of you have submitted. Give everyone a few seconds here. Don't be shy. See the number climbing. We'll give everyone 2 seconds and I'm going to move on. So for those of you who submitted an answer, it looks like we're pretty evenly across the board with managing online reviews and reputation and the disconnect amongst various demographics being the two leading. So why is this report so valuable, the 2021 Healthcare Reputation Report? Health systems are moving rapidly to adopt more consumer-focused strategies. So it's imperative to understand not only what consumers want, but also how they are choosing a healthcare provider. Our consumer survey with YouGov uncovered exactly what factors drive the consumer's choice of a care provider. Our reputation score analysis looked at the 25 largest health systems and ranked the top 15 leaders in online reputation and experience. But why reputation score? It provides a wide-ranging and complete analysis of both structured and unstructured feedback. The formula for the ranking is transparent and easy to understand, and it provides actionable insights, which helps brands perform better. So our consumer study found that the vast majority of healthcare consumers trust online reviews, specifically 80%. In fact, after insurance and location, third-party reviews are the most important factor for consumers when choosing healthcare, and they want to choose a doctor who is rated 4 stars or higher on Google. So Annie, how exactly are reviews influencing consumer choice?
Thanks, Celine. And the answer is very clear. When we asked consumers about how reviews are influencing them, they gave us a variety of answers, but most consumers, 51%, so a little more than half, have said that they have actually selected one provider over another based on reviews. And this is because we live in a feedback economy right now where anyone can research anything before making a purchase decision. Third-party ratings and reviews are influencing everything from the shoes you shop for on Amazon to the new restaurant in your neighborhood. And this expectation of a word-of-mouth driven experience has moved online, and it's extended to healthcare, where ratings and reviews are the most important decision factor, as you mentioned, after insurance and location. Now, patient ratings and reviews are the most important factor after insurance and proximity, but 50% of healthcare facilities and 65% of physicians had 0 reviews in 2020. So this is a massive disconnect between what consumers want, their expectation for a retail-like healthcare experience, and what healthcare is actually delivering for them. So the good news here is that since the industry as a whole has not leaned into this, they've not leaned into third-party reviews, this represents that low-hanging fruit in order to be successful here. And, you know, I know, Celine, you've had some experience with this in your previous role, having built up a review program in your previous position. So how do you do this?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things is we were really focused on increasing our review volume. And, you know, it might be counterintuitive is, yeah, let's ask for more feedback, right? But for us, it was simple. We just wanted to ask. We wanted to see where are we going to have the most success in increasing that statistically significant data for our online feedback. So where we've seen the most success with our healthcare clients at Reputation is when they automate review requesting, when they ask for that feedback.
So that sounds great, but we all know that not everybody has something good to say. So by asking for reviews, aren't you just opening the floodgates to a bunch of negative?
So great question. You know, that was actually a fear of mine. We noticed that, you know, those with a terribly horrific negative experience, they're going to leave you feedback regardless of whether you ask them or you don't ask them. But where we see the difference is that those who just, you know, they came in, they received the experience that they expected, they're not going to go out of their way to share that unless you prompt them to, unless you ask them. So requesting reviews is a great way to increase your online feedback in ways that reflect the quality of care that you know you're providing. But real quick, let's shift back to millennials. There's a major shift in how the younger generation digests the feedback economy. Only 29% of people aged 27 to 35 say brand is important, compared to the 53% of people aged 55 and over. So this shows that brand loyalty does not exist how it traditionally has, and that brands can no longer rely on their name and historical word-of-mouth reputation. Online reviews have replaced this. However, although millennials appear to be less brand loyal, we did find that they care more about price transparency. So out of all the top considerations when considering a healthcare location or provider, price transparency has the most enthusiasm from consumers. So this represents another major disconnect between what patients want and the reality of what healthcare brands are giving them. So some big strides have been taken in the past 2 years, with the most significant change being the requirement by hospitals for certain procedures to be listed along with price information. But there's a lot more work to be done before our industry is presenting this information to our patients in meaningful, easy to find format. This isn't going to go away. So Annie, if price transparency is so important, yet we have this hesitancy from healthcare providers to share this information, what does this look like?
Well, I think that the biggest thing that we are going to see in the future is the same thing that we have seen in the past year or so, which is that technology and technology companies are forcing the hand of traditional healthcare by driving better digital access and a more retail-like experience. And if traditional healthcare wants to continue to compete, they're going to need to be shoppable. And search engines like Google are going to continue to use a combination of factors like ratings and reviews, location, insurance, and price as factors in that search. I mean, they've already done it with Google Shopping. You can buy anything through Google. Healthcare is going to be coming soon. There's no doubt about it that this will be a future state. Google wants to keep as much of that consumer experience within Google's products as possible. And so you have to start thinking about that structured data now and preparing for it now, when, you know, even if it's not completely required for every single service to be shared, or it's not required for you to list every single insurance that you accept. These are fields that Google is going to be pushing you to include. So you have to make those preparations now to prepare your data. So
really good.
So we you know, beyond the pricing transparency, you know, we know that that's really important, but what about the past year? What has changed with consumer behavior when it comes to selecting a doctor or location? You know, this is a consumer study that we've done in past years, but since, you know, this past year was so different, we wanted to add a few more different options for them to select from. And when we asked about the factors that weigh into their decision, it's clear that consumers are more aware of the risks of being in a clinical environment, and they want to be protected. You know, if you had asked an average consumer 2 years ago what they knew about hospital-acquired infections, you know, they would have had no idea what you were talking about. And now, you know, they're asking for information around, you know, waiting room policies. Do I get to wait in my car? Can I do a virtual visit instead? Can I avoid going into the building? And, you know, even though we're opening up more electives, we still need to make sure that we are reassuring them about safety, because this continues to be a trend for consumers to want to know more information than they have in the past. So, you know, we've talked a lot about the consumer survey that we did, but there was also a second part of this, and we analyzed, as you mentioned, the 25 largest healthcare systems in the U.S. This was based on publicly available revenue data. And from that list, we pulled in more than 348,000 online reviews across more than 113,000 physician and facility listings. So this is all publicly available information, and it's feedback that consumers have shared in the form of ratings and reviews and comments and social. So we looked at all 25, we analyzed those, and then we found the top 15, and we looked at what separates those top 15 from the bottom 15 laggards. So here's the top 15 that were on the list. And you know, you can probably see some familiar names here. You know, as you recall from the beginning of the presentation, Celine mentioned the formula for this ranking is based on reputation score. This is a transparent and easy to understand metric, and it provides a complete analysis of both structured and unstructured feedback. In this case, we looked at structured data elements like how complete are the listings online, how complete is the information, how accurate is the data, and the star ratings themselves. Then we also applied our patented natural language processing to analyze all the unstructured data that includes the sentiment of the reviews themselves. So you've had a chance to look at this list, and one of the things that we hear from folks when they're seeing this for the first time is, you know, that they have some thoughts about the ranking. So my question for the group here, and you can answer through the poll, is, are you surprised by these 15 leaders? And, you know, you can indicate yes or no, and we'll see what people think here.
Again, don't be shy.
All right, I'm going to check out the results here. Oh, okay. So the majority of you are not surprised by these brands. There's about a third of you who are surprised by it. So let's talk about how these leaders ended up on this list. When we examined, So can you tell us more, Celine, about, when we examined these, what were the patterns that we found here?
Yeah, so we found that leaders, the top performers, outperform laggards, the bottom performers, in all sections of sentiment, visibility, and engagement. And sentiment is especially important because out of all the elements of reputation score, sentiment has the biggest impact. So we found that the top 15 leaders with the highest reputation scores received 16% more positive reviews than the bottom 10 laggards. And reviews also make a really big difference in visibility. So we found that leaders accumulate an average of 232% more reviews than laggards. It's a huge number. So the average number of reviews for leaders is about 683, and for laggards, that number drops down to only 205. And lastly, a really impactful difference between leaders and laggards is engagement. And the gap between leaders and laggards is 57 percentage points for engagement. So in short, leaders engage more with their customers and respond to reviews much better than laggards do. So with
Celine, while you're transitioning to the next slide, I just want to point out, because we've had a couple of questions come through about the rankings list, and I want to let the entire group know that this is part of a complete report. It's a 50-page report that includes the analysis of the entire consumer survey that we did, so answers from consumers, and we've got all of that, plus all of the metrics around the reputation ranking list, as well as the scoring. So if you go to reputation.com/healthcare, you'll be able to find the 2021 annual reputation report there and download it, and it has all of the information you could possibly want.
Great note, Annie. So with all of that in mind, reputation score has proven to be a really meaningful key metric. And we found that physicians with strong reputation scores experience a 540% more conversions. And additionally, healthcare organizations with a 501 or higher reputation score have a 1,290% more conversions on their Google My Business GMB listings than those with a 100 to 200 reputation score. That's a tremendous difference. And knowing that the pandemic had an impact on consumer search behavior in 2020, we were really interested to see what impact, if any, the pandemic had on the connection between reputation score and as you can see from the difference between the time periods is the volume of actions taken. So this shouldn't come as any surprise when you think about how much elective care was put on hold during the peak of the lockdown. And as we're coming out of the pandemic, you can see the overall volumes of actions going back up as consumers begin to search for care they neglected during the pandemic. So the reason why we're looking at conversions on GMB is because GMB has become your new digital front door, and it continues to drive patient interaction to the point where it has more visibility than your branded website. So let's talk a little bit about GMB. Consumerism and the rise of digital technology has changed the way healthcare has to think about experience, and care access and delivery is consistently evolving. So increasingly, this means building an experience that connects the digital and the clinical experiences from search to sentiment and action, and healthcare organizations must get found and they must get chosen on Google and then drive improvements based on third-party feedback, such as Google reviews. So this is really important. This is a really big takeaway. 82% of consumers have used online reviews to find a provider, but only 3% have used CAP sites like hospitalcompare.gov. So for consumers who read reviews, we found these on the screen to be the most popular sites. These results tell us that healthcare brands should focus on Google, as we've been talking about, and as it remains the top destination for all consumers seeking reviews and ratings for providers. And this is especially true for millennials. 47.6% indicated that they use Google reviews to evaluate a provider. So Annie, why does all of this matter?
So it matters because, as I mentioned earlier, Google is going to continue to intercept the experience before consumers ever get to your website. The old way of managing digital strategy was to launch a new website and then drive a bunch of paid marketing to that site. And that's still somewhat true. You know, you can do a bunch of paid marketing and send them to landing pages where they can convert. But the single most important factor when it comes to your organic search results, where you appear when you run a Google search, that remains to be Google My Business. And guess what the second most important factor is? Reviews. So what does this mean? This means that Google is providing a heavier weight to the factors that are off-site, so off of your own site. This is considered off-site SEO. And when you look at the numbers for your on-page, that's on-page SEO, that's your own website, that's 15%. So your Google My Business listings, which is the piece that shows up when you run a search. If you're running a search in mobile, it's the first thing that shows up in Google. If you're running a search on desktop, it's the knowledge panel off to the right. It shows just how important this is. And what Google has done is it's referring to local search as its local 3-pack. That local 3-pack includes maps, search, and reviews. And so those three things are making up that 3-pack for local search, and Google My Business is driven by that. Now, these search results are going to be influenced by the way that you engage on your Google My Business profiles. So for example, if you have a profile that has 5 reviews and they are all 5-star reviews, so you have a 5-star average, and that's coming up next to a result within the same specialty that has a 4.8 out of 5, but they have 20 reviews instead of 5, Google is actually going to rank that lower average higher in proximity on the page because it sees that 20 reviews is a higher volume, so it's more likely to represent an accurate view of the experience. Now, that's just an example here, but what this means is that when consumers are searching, they're going to be taken down a path, and more often than not, they're going to have the opportunity to convert, and that opportunity to convert is going to happen without them ever coming to your website, and they can do that on Google My Business. What I would encourage everyone on this call to do, maybe not during the presentation, but later on today, is run a few mobile searches. See what happens when you start searching for certain symptoms, and it takes you down a path of the type of specialist that you might need, the treatment that you might need, and then Google's going to connect you to care that is in your local area and ranked by reviews. So this becomes really important if you are going to show up at the moment a consumer is searching for care, because that's the only moment that matters. It doesn't matter when they are, driving down the highway, looking at a billboard. That's not the moment that they are searching for care. They are searching for care when they start typing in their symptoms into Google. And this is how you are going to show up when they are searching. So, Celine, I know I've talked a lot about, how important these reviews are, and that it matters the most on Google. Let's talk a little bit about how to actually deliver a better experience. So, how can we make sure that we are reducing that disconnect? We talked a lot at the beginning about the things that consumers are telling us that they expect certain things and healthcare is not delivering on those things. So let's move on to how you can deliver what consumers want and need and connect that to what you're able to provide to them. So it starts with what we refer to as these customer journey touch points, or you can also think about these as the moments that matter most. And you have to start thinking about what patients are doing and feeling in these moments. These are all touch points that things can either be positive or negative. They could create friction or make things easier. And we've all probably gone through these, consumer experience journey maps where you plot out all those points. But at the end of the day, it's all about the questions that a consumer has throughout that process. So what are these symptoms that I have? What do they mean? What is the kind of treatment that I need? And what's the doctor who's going to be matched for me? And then after I get my care, will I recommend this to someone else? And all of this is being housed within Google search. And you need to think about all of these points within your own digital experience, whether it's apps or the on-site experience or virtual care or billing. All of these pieces need to work together, and you need to have a really holistic understanding of your voice of the customer by asking these questions and answering them and determining where you have opportunities for operational improvement. So for healthcare, once you've understood those moments that matter, you can then start to listen to patients everywhere they communicate feedback. Then you can take that and deliver the best possible experience that's going to drive retention and increase revenue. And once you've improved this experience for patients along the journey, your brand is going to be more likely to be found and chosen. It creates this positive cycle. And Google's going to use that, more people are going to select you, and it continues to grow. So if you're thinking about, you're looking at this experience and you're saying, okay, well, we are working toward a better consumer experience, but we're somewhere along this journey and we're just starting, or we've been doing a lot, but we're not seeing results. Every healthcare system that we have worked with, every brand, every payer network, they're all telling us that they're at different phases of this journey. So what we have done is we've tried to simplify things, and it starts with listening. This is basic table stakes. If you are not listening to online feedback on social media, on ratings and reviews, looking at what people are saying about you across the web, you are unable to resolve the immediate issue, and you're not able to do service recovery. So that is the most basic table stakes that you have to start with. You have to be doing service recovery via digital feedback. And a lot of times we see customers doing this. They are doing service recovery, but it's fragmented. So maybe the feedback is coming in through Facebook, and the ones who are monitoring Facebook are in marketing, but the ones that can resolve the issue for the consumer sit in the call center. And so there's this, handoff that has to happen, and then there's follow-up, and then it becomes a challenge. And consumers expect that if they are messaging you on any platform, doesn't matter where it is, they want to hear a response. And they've been trained to expect this because other brands are doing it, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or wherever. So be prepared to listen and respond when people have immediate issues. Now, the second phase of building a better experience is how can we prevent problems from happening in the future? So we're analyzing our feedback, we've gotten some actionable insights, but then we're using those to improve the experience and improve quality. So this is considered the, taking action piece of it. This is operational improvement. This is more than just fixing an immediate issue. You're actually looking at how you can expand and make this work better. This is where we see a lot of healthcare systems, and they're basically looking at their the feedback that consumers are giving them and being able to identify patterns. And these patterns help them to improve that in the future. But what we really want to get to is that third piece. So this is where you start to win, is when you have enough feedback collected into a single hub, call it the voice of customer. You can start to look at all of the areas where you can reimagine the experience altogether. That's when you can start to exceed your performance metrics. You can drive higher patient access and patient volumes, and you can really start to see whether you're delivering on that brand promise. And this is where you start to see marketing, analytics, IT, patient experience, digital, all of these groups coming together around a single consumer experience. And that's the delivery of that brand, the experience of consumers with your brand. So we have allotted plenty of time for questions because we figured there would be a lot of them, and we were not wrong. I've seen lots of questions coming through. So I'm going to pause here, and we'll open it up to the group for questions.
Yeah, thank you so much to our panelists for such a great presentation. It looks like attendees have figured out the Q&A here, so we'll go ahead and get started with the first question. So first question is, how should you respond to a bad review, and should you thank patients for a good review?
Yeah, so I can take that one.
Celine handle that one. Yeah, there you go.
So you should always respond to all the feedback that you're getting, both the negative and the positive. So when you respond to a bad review, take that as an opportunity. That's an opportunity to provide service recovery, an opportunity to learn what you might not be doing well and where you need to improve. So in terms of how to actually respond to that, thank them for reaching out, thank them for their feedback, let them know that you're listening to that feedback, that you take that into account when you're making these operational improvements. And then also, thank the people that are leaving you really great feedback. As we talked about earlier, those that are going and leaving you that great feedback without being prompted to, they're going out of that way to leave, that great experience behind. So make sure you acknowledge that and say, thanks so much. This is great to hear. We'll make sure that we forward that along should, anyone be mentioned. It's a great opportunity to show kudos to your employees, if an employee is mentioned as well. So all around, definitely respond to both the good and the bad.
Thank you for that insight there. Next question is, are reviews on the practice's Facebook page helpful and important?
I can take that one as well, Annie.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So where Annie was probably going to go with this, as you saw, review volume, review recency, and review spread is really important here. We talk a lot about Google, but you don't want to negate your other review platforms such as Facebook, especially one that is so conversational, right? So people are going to your Facebook page, they're learning more about what you're doing at your brick and mortar location. So those Facebook reviews, that's going to be a big part of telling your story in that dialogue. But Annie, if you want to chime in and add.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add to that is out of all of the sources for reviews that consumers indicated they are going to, and we did, for this year's study, we allowed them to choose more than one. So that's why, you see a lot of spread there. But Facebook was pretty low on the list. They ranked 8th out of 12. So, I think it is dependent upon the target demographic but they're important, but not to the detriment of other sites. We still think that Google is the most important compared to Facebook.
It looks like our next question is focused on leadership responding to questions. So it says leaders have a 57% higher response rate to online reviews. So what constitutes a response? Would it be acknowledgement or action taken on those concerns in the review? So what are just some best practices there for what should constitute a response, and by what means leaders respond?
Annie, you want to take this one?
I'll take this one, but then I'm going to kick it to you again too. In my past experience, having worked at one of the largest health systems in the U.S. and heading up their digital experience team, we had a variety of different approaches to response. Response means acknowledging that they have posted a review. You can either thank them for that or acknowledge that they have a concern. And then, in terms of the action taken, usually the best practice is to take it offline. So if the person is, very upset, you don't want to let that play out and go back and forth with them, publicly. Most of our healthcare customers find that to be, ineffective at best, and sometimes makes it even worse. So what you want to do is acknowledge that there is a concern there, acknowledge the complaint, or even acknowledge if it's a compliment, thank them for that. But if there needs to be follow-up, you should have a way for them to follow up with you outside of that channel. So the best thing to do would be to give them a link to some sort of a response form that is HIPAA compliant, that is encrypted and protects PHI. They can provide you all the information that you might need to open up an event reporting system ticket, or to open up a ticket with patient advocacy or the call center, or to triage that to the billing team. And so that's what a lot of our clients do as a best practice, is to have that triaged through a workflow. But, sometimes you just can't get around it, and you might have to have them call you, or maybe you don't know exactly who that person is because they're using a screen name that is unfamiliar to, any of the patients that you've seen recently. So you want to make sure that you give them, the option to provide that additional information that you need in order to follow up with them. And, in terms of best practices for how quickly, usually, when it comes to social media and reviews, consumers want to see a response in a maximum 24 hours. Sometimes if it's, a really tricky one, you might need more time. Ideally, you're responding within the hour because that's just customer service. That's the expectation now. And if it's something that's going to require you to follow up internally, or it's going to require you to track down an answer, don't leave them hanging. At least tell them, you know what, we're looking into this for you, and we're going to get back to you shortly with a response. And that's a great way to at least acknowledge it and give you some time to find the answer that they need. A lot of this is going to come through, maybe it's not a review that is posted, maybe it's a message that they send a message to your Facebook page through Messenger, or, Google now has business messages, so you can click to send a message right to the business. And, that's another way where you're going to be looking at a channel where consumers expect something. And if you're not prepared to deliver to them what they expect, you need to start connecting those dots. And that means engaging the call center, making sure that your marketing team isn't, on their own responding to all of this, but there is a workflow to route feedback to the appropriate parties for resolution. So I think it's a good time to go to this question. I know it's not in order, but I think it's one that is relevant to a lot of people. PHI. So Celine and I both have different experiences with PHI and HIPAA, and what I can tell you is that every organization is going to have a slightly different take on it and a slightly different approach for how they protect that information. First and foremost, any information that a patient posts themselves is considered user-generated content. So that is not material that you are responsible to protect. They have posted that. They have put that out online. However, your responsibility is once you've received that information, or even if they send it to you privately, you've now received that and need to protect it. So what happens is, if someone posts in a comment that, I had my knee operated on and I had this big problem and here's my complaint about it, some healthcare brands that we work with will say they don't even want to use the patient's name. So they wouldn't say, Mr. Smith, we're sorry that you had this experience, please contact us. They would simply say, please contact us so that we can discuss this with you. The other thing that comes into play is, apology versus no apology. Depending on, the brand, and we see it with all different approaches to this, is, do you acknowledge fault by apologizing when you see that review? A lot of times brands will want to, at least protect that until they have investigated it further, especially since you're dealing with some sensitive issues. So whatever the case is for your organization, you'll want to vet that out with your legal team, patient advocacy, if you have a person and family engagement team, and make sure that the language and tone for your responses is on point for your brand and also shows empathy for the person that's putting that information out there. And we have a lot of best practices for that. In fact, if you go to our website, you might be able to find some materials around best practices for protecting PHI as well as responding to reviews in healthcare.
Thank you. Yeah, lots of questions on HIPAA there. And next question is, last week a report had found that up to 20% of healthcare reviews are fake. So how does that affect analysis, or is there anything to minimize that?
There's a couple of things that you can do, I would not think that it is that high. I have not seen that report that 20% are fake. I know that there is a lot of fake reviews when it comes to retail and product reviews, but when it comes to healthcare, one of the concerns is, what if someone's just out to get me and they're putting some information out there that is false? There are a couple of things you can do. You can either flag that, and if the information can be proven to be incorrect, then it's usually a violation of terms for that particular review site. So, for example, some review sites will say that it has to be about a verifiable experience that person had with your brand. And, maybe there's a consumer out there who's got it out for someone who works for you. We've seen some trolling, some harassment of an individual physician or an individual location where someone had a bad experience and they post several reviews. Those can all be flagged as well. And sites like Google and other sites have a way to do this. There's usually a little icon or a link that you can click on, and you simply fill out and they go into their queue for review. Most of the time, and I have an exact percentage, but I would say 90% of the time you'd be successful in that if they are violating the terms of service for that platform. If you're unsuccessful in getting it removed, there are other avenues you can explore, and it involves sending a certified letter. There's a lot of extra work that you could do if it's something that is that serious. But again, it's kind of difficult to know when something is trolling versus a person who had a legitimately bad experience and they're just looking for a response. And a lot of times when someone has that experience, if you can respond to them in a way that is compassionate, shows empathy, and solves their problem for them, then other people who come to that site and see this review and see how you responded are going to be reassured by the fact that you solved that problem for them. So in many cases, it's better to leave that out there.
Absolutely. Thanks for those tips there. The next question is what feedback sources have been historically underutilized, and how can health systems better leverage those?
There are so many feedback sources that you will start to uncover when you start thinking about that patient journey. So the first step would be plot out every touch point with your brand, whether it's the search that they are doing online to the registration process, online registration, finding a provider, getting matched with a provider based on categories, the billing experience, all of these touch points. Where we see the most opportunity to do better is in anything related to billing. That shouldn't be a surprise, but we see a ton of just really negative feedback around the billing experience. But what happens is they get treated as service recovery opportunities. So individual touch points where they're not using that feedback to look at the entire experience holistically. So, oh, this person had a problem with this bill, let's fix that. This person had a problem with a bill, let's fix that. And then you end up with all of these individual experiences across the enterprise where you've resolved the problem. You've resolved it many, many times over, but you haven't utilized that as a feedback source. So it's been underutilized. You haven't taken all of that holistic information and looked at, okay, what is the root cause of this? And how can we improve the experience, reimagine what billing is like, and make it a good experience for consumers? I mean, not that anyone is particularly excited to pay a bill, but we can make it better for them. And so that's what we would recommend in that particular case, is to look at your pain points, particularly around billing.
Great. And next year, so earlier it was suggested to ask for feedback via review requesting. So what methods there have you seen to be most successful?
Yeah, Annie, I can take this one. So for review requesting, there's a couple different methods there. And again, as Annie mentioned, it's really going to be depending on your organization and what you're comfortable with and what your legal team is comfortable with. But there's a couple different options. First being email-based, connecting that to your EHR and aggregating those email addresses that you do have access to and sending them an email-based review request. Also, SMS, you can send them a review request through SMS and make sure that you have different sources such as Google listed there for them to easily go right there to leave a review. And then also there's a couple different options with different surveys, specifically with Reputation and our Google Review Booster survey, where they're sent a survey and then they can fill out their answer, and right there it seamlessly will bring that answer into a review, so they can easily do both at the same time.
All right, looks like we've got just a few more here. So how do you recommend healthcare brands operationalize insights from third-party feedback sources?
Great question. So I've done a lot of this in my previous role specifically, is operationalizing all of this feedback that we get in the wild and how do we take action on that. And we were able to really look at trend lines to see, okay, what are people saying in real time, as Annie mentioned earlier? What's the feedback that's coming in right now? And a lot of times, you get reviews sometimes from patients that are actually in-house. They're actually at your facility. So how can we make sure that we're taking action on that feedback? So we did a lot of trend line analysis seeing where our different service lines were headed. Are they going upwards? Are they going downwards? And able to identify that low-hanging fruit that we can address now before it becomes a bigger issue. A lot of times that feedback that we're getting is non-clinical, right? It's not necessarily, was I happy with my appendix removal? It's more so, the front desk receptionist was rude, or I wasn't happy with the valet. So being able to take all of that in, seeing where your pain points are, also seeing what's working well at the same light, and then seeing where can we really address those issues as they come in.
Absolutely. And next year, how do you recommend optimizing Google My Business?
Annie, you want to take a stab at this one?
Sure. So first and foremost, you need to set the foundation for managing not just Google My Business, but all of your ongoing updates to your own provider directory, your third-party business listings, including Google My Business. And then how do you make sure that that gets updated on a regular basis? So we recommend using an API to feed that data automatically. You can connect it to your credentialing system, or maybe you have some other source of truth like a data lake or a data management platform that you're using. And there are different ways to automate this so that if you change a phone number, it goes out automatically to be fixed on Google My Business, on your own website, on all the other sites that are out there. So the first thing to do is get your data in order. That's first and foremost. You want it to be accurate, because even if you don't have all the positive reviews on Google My Business, you want at a bare minimum for people to be able to find you and select care with you. The second thing you're going to want to do is make sure that it is a complete experience. So don't ignore those other areas that maybe aren't the information. Maybe there is a question and answer that hasn't been a question that hasn't been asked, and you know that you're getting a lot of those questions through the call center. You can seed those Q&A. You can seed questions and answers in Google My Business, and the more Q&A you have out there, the more complete Google considers that listing to be, and the better you're going to perform. The third thing that I think is really interesting is over the past year, Google has made a lot of changes to help healthcare to provide better access to consumers. So virtual care, for example, didn't used to be one of the default URLs on a Google My Business listing. You didn't used to have the option to schedule an appointment online. You didn't have the ability to show whether you were a testing facility for COVID or a vaccination site. And all of these are now data attributes that Google has built in, and you should absolutely be taking advantage of. And this would be a bare minimum. If you are offering any of these options on your website, your Google My Business has to reflect that, because if the person never makes it to your website and that's the only place where they can, send you a chat, you're not going to hear from them. If they never make it to your website and that's the only place where they can schedule an appointment, they're not going to schedule an appointment. So think about those touch points. Think about where those patients are going to be intercepted, because as I've said in the past, it doesn't matter where the person schedules the appointment. I don't care if the website gets credit or the landing page gets credit or the Google My Business page is the one getting credit. My desire is for that appointment to get scheduled. And if they can do that in fewer clicks, then I'm going to win in the end, because I'll have more appointments.
Great. So last question here. An attendee is asking that they said many health systems are driven by payers who look to the hospital consumer assessment of healthcare providers and systems to measure the patient experience. However, patients are looking to Google review. So how have the reputation leaders managed patient experience from HCA, HPS, and online reviews?
This is a great question, and it's one we talk about a lot because CAPs are important. That is an important element of the overall holistic feedback that you're going to see. But it's only one piece of it. To look at everything, you need to start pulling in feedback from your online chat, your symptom checkers, your virtual care experiences, and you've got to start requesting reviews. What most health systems that are successful are doing is they are both having their CAPS surveys still go out, but they are also asking for a review request, and that comes separately. So, for example, if I see a provider today, I might get a text, an hour after my visit, I get a text, how was your visit today? Give me a, 1 to 5 rating and some feedback. And that can go straight to the healthcare system. Then it might say, hey, you had this experience. Would you be willing to leave us a review on Google? And I click on the link and I can post a review to Google easily. So this is great because it's real time. With CAPS, there's a lag. There's a delay between the time that they have that experience and the time that they are completing that survey. It's a much more involved process. It's a longer survey. Even if it's being provided digitally, it's still going to be a totally different set of questions than what you would be asking as a review request. So what we advise all of our customers to do is, first of all, patient experience and marketing should be working together to understand all of the feedback from structured being CAPs or surveys, and unstructured being online reviews, comments, all of that data that is considered in the wild. Once you look at both, you can start to see, oh, well, we're getting a lot of this. This is a trend that's happening in real time. Let's fix this thing before it becomes a trend that affects our CAPs and affects our scores down the road. So you can start to use real-time feedback as a way to be more agile in your operational improvements and then drive what will end up being future CAPS improvements as well. The other thing you can do is bring the two together, create some kind of an aggregate score, and show both. You can show the CAPS ratings and the Google ratings. You can show that on your website. We have plenty of customers that are doing that. They have both the CAPS transparency as well as transparency into their Google reviews and other reviews. So it just depends on where you are and how eager you are to take on that change. But the first step is to bring the two groups together so that they each understand the other side of it.
Well, that is all the time that we have left for today. I want to thank Annie and Celine again for an excellent presentation and to Reputation for sponsoring today's webinar. To learn more about the content presented, please check out the resources section that you should see on your webinar console and also fill out the post-webinar survey. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope you have a great afternoon.